Chapter 98. Herbert's 100 Harem. The city slept deep and well at night. Despite its weird shelf tower-style construction, it seemed to almost fold in on itself when darkness hit the world. Oh, sure, there were lights here and there, but for the most part the city made immense use of natural light, both reflected and direct. A strange policy of the people had it, so there were only lights at the edges of the massive platforms as a sort of warning light. Little traffic, less people, and only a few lights. Very still and quiet, almost respectful and considerate compared to the cities of Earth. Of course, most of this is because everyone's busy peeking out windows to make sure no one's spying on their little clubs. He mutters to himself in disgust. The suit he commissioned from the Dauntless had arrived. A fully body Kevlar stocking that went from black to dark blue with light-absorbing dark blue visor covering his eyes. There wasn't a single millimeter of exposed skin on him. For weapons, he had specialized silence guns with the little axiom tricks mastered by the EFL, and a series of both smoke and flashbang grenades coupled with a solid K-bar and, mostly for intimidation, a straight single-edged sword with a large curved tip. A falchion it's called, basically the sword that a machete is a disappointing grandson to. His target doesn't seem dangerous. Of course, that's the point. The target is a distraction. He knows this. He'd managed to sneak into the apartment of Miss Darla Swipe and take a few DNA samples out of the alien Roomba, as well as plant a few bugs. However, he had found out after running the bit of fur through the sampler that there was actually a Miss Margarine Jules in the apartment and that the hair had shown signs of heavy chemical modifications, enough to almost destroy the DNA. Currently, he was working under the assumption that Jules was working as Swipe's body double to give the woman a 24/7 alibi, but he wasn't sure, which was why he was watching closely. So far, he was just peeping on a civilian whose DNA did not match up with their legal identity, a strictly small time issue in the gaping cesspit that was Centrus and its outright competitive corruption. So here he was sitting on the roof of an apartment building the next city spire over with a pair of small but powerful custom binoculars right up against his visor as his mind drifted somewhat while absently taking in all the details. The binoculars did double duty as a dual-lens camera anyways, so he wasn't too worried about missing things. The thing that really got to him was just how much work there was for each of the politicians. Ambassador Hlel was someone he'd spoken to a few times and was on good terms with. Yet, she was always so busy. The woman basically had a dozen full-time jobs running concurrently, and she had to pick and choose which duty would be the one she could work on while letting the rest fester. If she was standard as far as politicians go, then corruption was only half the pie. The rest was a sheer lack of infrastructure on one of the most populated and wealthy planets in the galaxy, which was just mind-bending to think about, and the sheer silence he'd gotten from the intelligence officers had been deafening when he'd reported that finding. Apparently, he had confirmed a few theories by offering the last few chunks of data to lock it in. He's dragged out of his musings as he sees Miss Jules open a hidden wall panel with a closed-circuit communicator. He'd found that one and had put a small bug in there to basically record what's going on through it and store it for later retrieval. It wouldn't broadcast any signals to stay hidden, and it blended flawlessly with the circuitry of the machine. It would take a technician or the blueprints being on hand to figure out something is up. The screen on the video phone activates, prompting the reaction behind the binoculars, beneath the visor and through the Kevlar mask of an eyebrow quirking up on Herbert's face. Jules is talking to her double, or rather the double is reporting into the original. Unfortunately, while he's been practicing his lip reading, they're not speaking a language he knows. It seems to be composed of mews and hisses from the way their mouths and throats are moving, but the body language is telling a story, and not a short one either. The one on the screen is coldly furious with a harsh glare for her double, But the anger is clearly misplaced unless he's massively misreading the situation. The double is both terrified and resigned. This is an old terror returned and renewed, a horrible experience, but one that's become nearly clockwork for the poor woman. The conversation goes on for a few minutes as Jules makes a long report to Swipe. Swipe's answer is terse and rude, and she cancels the call shortly after, leading to Jules sighing in relief. The woman seems to collect herself, and then she collects a small string with numerous credit discs dangling off it. The discs in question are mostly the red girdle crystal coins, but there are a couple pieces of bright blue tritite hanging from it as well. All told, there are 137 credits on that string. She ties it to her ornamental collar and it hangs into her breasts. Some fluffing of the fur later and it vanishes in her cleavage entirely. That explains what she does without pockets, at least. Herbert mutters to himself as she leaves the apartment and several minutes later leaves the building entirely in her air car. His customized communicator vibrates in its pouch and he draws it out to see that the tracker is working fine. He nods to himself and quickly makes his way across the rooftop and down the side of the building. The corner of the L-shaped building provides all the resistance he needs to scuttle down as a shadow. He makes it to the edge of the spire, and a quick glance either way followed by a gathering of axiom has him coil his legs under him and launch himself from one to the other. He lands silently and darts into the shadows of the building. Then he gets to the corner of this building and starts going up until he reaches the rooftop. A hop down onto the balcony of the level below brings him closer. He moves fast and drops down another level. Then two more, followed by one last drop. Then he focuses hard and fast, and seems to fade somewhat from reality as he hops forward. He passes through the reinforced and alarmed glass doorway as a ghost and pads through the apartment in utter silence. He slips up to the hidden component and focuses on his right arm, and it fades again. He reaches through the wall and into the device to grab the tiny listening bug and pull it out. He inspects the device to find it in perfect working order and deactivates it before opening a pouch. He draws out a second bug and places the used one into the pouch before reaching in and placing the new bug right where he took the old one from. Suddenly, the pouch with his custom communicator vibrates ever so, and he pulls it out. The tracking device is coming back and fast. He weighs his options and slips into a hiding place. He doesn't have to wait long. Miss Jules rushes in, hissing and snarling to herself in the strange Faily language, and quickly ransacks the apartment before grabbing something she forgot and storming out. Less informative than he would have liked, but knowing she's absent-minded isn't a bad thing. After another minute, he slinks out of his hiding spot and picks his way through the apartment. Then he fades away and rushes onto the balcony again. Axiom made things almost too easy. He climbs up to the top of the building from balcony to balcony, followed by a clamber down the side using its corner. He then hurls himself back to the previous spire and uncovers his personal transport and disguise. A loose pair of pants with a large shirt with unlaced boots and several hiding places for all the weapons and pouches. A safety helmet completes it, and he looks like he's just got a dark undershirt and gloves on. Nothing suspicious at all. His destination of the Dauntless might raise an eyebrow or two, but by the time anyone would think to stop him, he's already arrived and is passing off all his equipment to the Information and Intelligence Division. Of course, some people were now saying they were the Information, Intelligence, and Interrogation Division with how many times they've been processing prisoners, but that was far from official. Well done, young man. Any difficulties? Only my own impatience. Something to work on, Herbert says as he exits the changing room with his civilian clothing back on and the stealth suit tucked under his arm. Keep the suit, young man. Inform those who ask that we're concerned after the attack upon you and wove you some low-profile armor. That and it keeps you well out of the pajamas and such, Sir Philip says, and Herbert nods in appreciation. Very good. You're an able student. It's merely an unfortunate state of affairs that you're unable to infiltrate in disguise and can only do so in stealth. But needs must as needs must. Yes, sir. Now, with all due respect, I think I should be going. I've probably pushed things too far, as is for a meeting with friends to be a proper excuse. Unlikely but possible. Go ahead, Sir Philip says, and Herbert starts rushing off and into the embassy spire proper. Does he have any idea how much leeway his apparent youth affords him? He asks out loud. Moments later, his communicator goes off. He picks it up and without missing a beat tells Herbert, "If you wish to leave listening devices on your superiors, don't immediately give it away by feigning prescience. Also, the fold of the collar, while an impressive place to place a bug without being caught, is quickly found out by those with a great deal of self-awareness." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir," Herbert replies. "Run along now." He prompts his apprentice as he pulls out the device from under his collar and deactivates it. "I'll be down tomorrow for remedial training." "Yes, sir," Herbert says as he stops the call. So much for getting one over on the old bastard. He quickly finds his way back into the embassy he's been living in. He makes little attempt to hide himself as he comes in with a smile and mussed-up hair. Then immediately begins fleeing from a trinity of Paris that notice him and know him as the one that's fun to chase, and if caught alone and sitting, gives scritches and wonderful rubs. "Whoops! Excuse me," he says, skidding by a group of his Zetan brides, and there's already smiles all around as he dashes away from the utterly harmless critters he's established a nervousness of. "You're a goof!" one of them calls out, and he races to his room and skids inside of it before very quickly stashing the new outfit in plain view of Ambassador Layla. He saw her, but she doesn't need to know that. "Still adjusting?" she asks, and he jumps a little to her amusement. "Oh, relax. It's just me." "Sorry, ma'am, I was—" "Excuse me," he says, climbing up the cupboard to avoid the incoming Paris. "They're harmless." She chides him ever so. "I understand that, but irrational fears are so named for a reason." Herbert volleys back. "Are you able to talk from up there?" she asks gently, and he nods. "Good. I was checking in to make sure you're safe. The more unpleasant elements of Centris are starting to really get their claws out and pointing them humanity's way. You proved yourself very thoroughly when you were attacked in the club, but more is happening. I'm concerned for your safety." "I appreciate it, ma'am. However, I'm more concerned for my wives. Despite being returned to my youth, I've had military training. I know how to handle myself when everything goes wrong. They don't." He replies, and she smiles. "You don't need to worry so much. You're married to Zedin and Yaoya, master hunters and top-tier predators. You need a Canador to face us directly in a fight. Maybe a Lidus if she's got a vicious streak," Ambassador Layla remarks. "Perhaps, but training and tools count for a lot. I have those things, and from what I can tell, the girls don't. I don't know. A little Tret, unused to Axiom side by side with a Zedin or a Yaoya, it's not even fair. Still, if you're more bothered by the Paris than the laser blasts you've been dodging, then I suppose I have nothing to worry about. Beyond your admittedly irrational fear," the ambassador says, and Herbert chuckles before hopping down. "Most of it's for entertainment. It's a wonderful icebreaker in conversations and has diffused a fair amount of arguments," he says, holding his hand down and letting one of the purrs crawl into it. He holds up the purring little beast to the ambassador. "Can you keep it between us?" "Perhaps if you tell me what it was you just tucked away?" "It's some low-profile armor, full-body, small-time protection. Nothing too extravagant, just really well-woven cloth and some goggles. The attacks have put everyone's back up on the Dauntless, and they're trying to find ways to keep everyone safe." "Ah, then maybe with those cultural weapons you might be on par with your brides by now. After all, every Zedin alive is armed and armored every moment of their lives, and the Yaoya are agile, strong, and stealthy enough to match us. Hopefully, human cunning and endurance can keep pace," Herbert remarks. Hopefully, Ambassador Layla says in a cheerful tone as she takes the Paris from Herbert and sweeps up the second in her tail. I'm glad you're handling this so maturely, she says, leaving the room. Until next we meet, Ambassador. Until then,